in family history?
Yes, we are. So, as I said in our little pre-talk, it's all Lori's fault
I think
because you posted something about having a bias, right?
I
So, do you want to
did.
start with that?
Yeah, yeah. So, and it was just kind of an offhand comment in my post about the Century Safe that I'm working on, because I just kind of assume that everybody has a bias, whether it's the family that you spent most time with or the family that we just spend more time with some people and we have relationships with that line of the family then and so I was kind of curious when you and other people were like, I don't know that I have a bias in family history. And so when you said, hey, let's do this, I was like, that's a cool idea. So that's what we're doing today. We're just talking about that, whether the bias exists. I think if we're honest, everybody has a bias towards something, a time frame, a topic, a person, a family line, place of origin. Just as researchers, there's things that spark our curiosity more than others.
Sure.
So that's kind of where I'm coming at it from. How about you?
So I've noticed that recently, definitely, that I have a bias towards my father's side of the family. Because you said it's usually towards the maternal side of the family.
That was my thesis going in, and we can talk about that. I don't know.
Right. So for me, it's not. And I think that's simply because I grew up closer, physically close to my father's mother, and my
Mhm.
dad was the only surviving son. So we three grandkids were it as far as she was concerned, right? And she was a wonderful grandmother. And I grew up in Germany, and my mom's side of the family is from Michigan, from Northwest Indiana, and the relationship between my mom and her mom broke down eventually and was never the greatest to begin with, right? So
Yep.
she didn't have much interest in her side of the family. We would get, Christmas packages and stuff like
Yep.
that. So that's how they sort of manifested. But other than that, I'm sometimes surprised because from my childhood, my American grandparents did visit us in Germany, and I do have a bunch of children's books, for instance, that my grandmother that she put an inscription in. So it's not like they were totally absent, but
Yeah.
and then there's a lot of my grandmother, my dad's mom was a wonderful storyteller, so I just grew up with a lot of the
Yeah.
oral history, right?
Right? Yeah. I think that's
Um,
so for me, mine was a little different. I lived most of my life geographically between my two sets of grandparents. My mom was an only child. Her parents lived 90 miles north. My dad had brothers and sisters and they lived 90 miles south. And we would see my mom's parents once a month, or I mean a lot. We always spent every holiday with them. And this is a true story and I've told it before. I thought that my other grandma lived 3 hours away until I was an adult driving down there and realized it's the same 90-minute drive because we would never go down there. It seemed like a longer drive in the car. My parents were more reluctant to go down there. And so it was just the same exact distance. But in my head, it seemed a lot different. And as an adult, there's all sorts of things you can dig into there. But so for me, it was my mom's side of the family. But interestingly, it was my grandpa's side that I'm most interested in. I don't remember hearing stories about my grandmother's side very much, but all the pictures in the house were of my grandpa's side of the family. And so those are the pictures that I remember, and those are the people that I was most curious about when I first started doing genealogy. So
yeah, so for me, so my mother's side of the family, um, within that family line, also the paternal line dominated a lot. So my grandfather was a Keller, and my older uncle's wife, my aunt who's still alive, 90 years old, she did all the genealogy. And even for her, she married into the Keller family. She did all the genealogy on the Kellers, not on her own family, which, that's not my family, so I'm not so interested in that. But
D-
they were really dominating.
Yeah.
And I'm
Is
not
it because
sure.
Go ahead.
you know? And my grandmother, so the interesting part for me now is that my grandmother's side of the family, so she came from a broken home. Her dad left her mom when she was about 13, left her with 5 kids. So there was a lot of shame there, a lot of family trauma, which I think is why her side of the family also took a back seat
Yeah.
to, she married into this more intact Irish family. And so that sort of, she latched onto that and that was kind of it. But for me now, it's been very interesting learning more about my grandmother's maternal side. And when I put together the family tree, so thanks to my aunt, that those families are much larger than not as affected by World War II, for instance, as
Right.
my father's side of the family, and they had a lot more kids. And so I had a lot of sort of just family tree stuff. And so I did that input over January, and I think I talked to you about it too because I found it horrendously depressing, sort of
Yeah, right.
to be
And then it's
reducing
hard.
human life
It makes
to
it hard, right?
yeah,
It makes it hard to do that. When you know that you're gonna get something uncomfortable, as a researcher, I'm not always in the mood to find something uncomfortable. I mean, sometimes I am, and I'll just plow through it. Sometimes it needs to be done, and then you plow through it. But if I'm just like on a casual, I'm going to do some research today. I generally don't want to dig into something that's going to make me feel really uncomfortable. And there are family lines that do that. There are family stories that do that. There's timelines that do that, right? There's locations.
mhm,
I think I think but when I think about bias and there's it's so broad, um, and I think it's always there. We decide what stories to tell. We decide who to tell them about. Decide who to do the research on, all that stuff. But I think just recognizing that we have preferences and then doing something about it is probably the goal in the whole discussion, right? Is that we look at those hard lines anyway. We dig into the family lines that we're not really familiar with, and sometimes we know so much we don't feel like we need to learn anymore, right? I mean, like you were talking about your family line that you knew all the stories, so you went to the other line you didn't know much about. Her family line didn't get covered the way that the other family did. um,
right. And I figured out since because that family line, my mother's side of the family, we have information that goes into the 18th century. And for me now, the redemptive part of having put together really the research that my aunt did. So it's not my genealogical research. But since we put that into my heritage, then we got deeper into the thing. And it turns out that on my grandmother's maternal side, I'm a daughter of the American Revolution because I have two ancestors, both from her grandfather's side and from her grandmother's side, both from from her mom and from her dad, that go all the way back to American
right.
colonial times. So for me, that is almost like a redemption, right? Like it's such a payback because I studied American history in college, and it's always
Right.
been an interest of mine, right? Because I grew up in Germany, so I always felt I learned about the world from a European
For
standpoint, and
sure, right.
I wanted a
Yeah.
counterpoint. I wanted to know more about my mom's country. So I've
Yeah,
always been
yeah,
interested in American history. So here I am, you know, I have family in Europe, and I, speak two languages. Um, but I'm also deeply rooted in this country. So to me,
right.
that was sort of a very unexpected, very cool payoff.
It is, right. And if we're going to frame that as a bias, right? I think America 250 right now has made a lot of us say, wouldn't it be cool if I had a revolutionary member of my family way back there? And a lot of us are looking at those things now. And it is part of a bias, right? It's like there's that bona fide that says, oh yeah, my family was here at the beginning, whatever that is. I've done the same kind of look at because all of my ancestry is German, and looking at like where was their military record in Germany? I don't have I don't know anything about those records, so I'm kind of lost. But even then, it's like I think that's a cool idea, to place your people in historical records, and in
Mm.
historical times, and and we all have preferences. Like I love 1850 to 1875. I love that time frame. I love everything about it. I love the Gilded Age, everything about it. The 20s and 30s, not so excited about. So I spend a lot of time in family lines that do cool things during those times I'm interested in. And I don't think that's a flaw unless that's all you do. And you don't do the work in the other time periods or
Right. So for me,
yeah.
it also has been interesting to see, World War II, I always associate it with my father's family, right? They went through it. They were refugees after the war,
Mm.
like all that horror.
And you heard the stories.
And I heard the stories, and, same for my husband's side of the family. Um, and just recently, my husband and I did some events around my children's book on the Upper Peninsula. So we were driving up to Wisconsin, and I had it in my head. I wanted to go see the Wisconsin Maritime Museum because they have a World War II submarine and you can do a tour there. So it just so happened that we were able to do the in-depth tour that day. And not until I'm standing in the tight space of the submarine and the guide asks us, "So why are you on this tour?" And there were only like 4 people on this tour.
Yeah.
It comes out of my mouth without me thinking, well, because my grandfather served on a submarine during World
Yeah.
War II.
Great.
That's my mother's dad. And
Yeah.
it was like a major light bulb moment. It's like, duh, like that's why I was drawn to this, right? And so one of the things I did last weekend when we were visiting my genealogy aunt was ask her about, that's her father-in-law. So
Yeah.
ask her about her father-in-law, my grandfather's, like actual record, where, because he wasn't in the Navy. He worked for a defense contractor. He was a diesel
Mhm.
engineer. But the family story was always like, Grandpa worked on the diesel engine during World War II. That
Yep.
was kind
Yep.
of it. Right? Okay, so you're like, what, where? I knew that the family
How does
had
that
moved to the
translate,
different,
right? Yeah. Yeah.
right, they moved to the different harbors, so they lived in Maryland, they lived in Connecticut, they lived in San Pedro, California, all of that. But, it's
Wow.
like, but what exactly did he do? And then we were digging. And there's also this tale that he went to Brazil on a maiden voyage with a submarine.
Okay.
So we're like, okay, I'd love to know more about that.
That's
So what did
researchable
I
for sure.
find
Yeah.
in my aunt's bin of genealogy stuff? Letters that my grandfather wrote to my grandmother with on stationery where it says USS Seal.
That's too much. Too
That's
much.
too much, right? So
Did you just jump up and down?
I just
I
had to
would have
go
just
look.
jumped up and down. I would have
Yeah.
screamed. I would have screamed for sure.
So to me, it's just been, it also sort of, I feel like the scales are sort of balancing out now to get the American side of the World War II experience.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, culturally, that's got to be a little tougher for you, right? I mean, there's a
Mm.
lot of baggage on both sides of that, um, and
Yeah, but I think,
to carry all of it at the same time, right?
yeah, I mean, but with my first book, I worked through the whole family history on my father's side and all that trauma and the displacement. And,
Yeah.
so I've sort of sorted that for myself. Um, but my mom's history, for her, it was very disruptive as a kid to be moved around every year, right? Because she grew up in the 30s and 40s, right? And
Mhm.
so every 5 minutes they're living somewhere else and the kids have to fit in. And they weren't really on military bases. So they
Right.
didn't
They
have
didn't have.
that kind of, support network either. They were
Yeah.
sort of adjuncts,
Yeah.
which I now understand. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's been so I just want to encourage everyone who's listening, like if you feel you have bias, it might be quite gratifying to dig into this family side
Right.
that you haven't dug into. Because my initial, I knew about my great grandfather running out on my grandmother's family. I knew about that. And I was, being a writer, I thought, oh, one could write about that because it's a juicy story.
Everything's
But,
material, right?
right. But then I was like, I don't want to spend years of my life on this guy. I just
Yeah.
don't. He was the black sheep of the family and he
Yeah.
treated everybody like shit. Like, I don't want to
Yeah.
yeah, so I sort of
Right.
pushed it
But
away, and
but
but
that's kind of a bias too, right? We know so little, but right at what we know is like, yeah, yeah, I don't want to
right,
go down that road for a
but
lot of different reasons, maybe.
yeah, but I kind of saw, I saw him as the main character. I didn't pay any attention to, my great grandmother, and the
Mhm.
whole family line that goes back to colonial times goes through her.
Right. And that's a bias too, right? A lot of times we'll look at the men and not the women, or we'll look at the women and not the men, and we follow the story and we go to the other side and it's a completely different story, right? It's like yeah, you never know who's going to be the link that you're looking for. Because
Right.
I believe, I don't know about anyone else out there, and comments are welcome, but I believe that every time we tell a story, we're telling something about ourselves and something we need to find. And that's why we do the work. That's why we follow different people. That's why we figure out where we belong in the world by doing this thing called genealogy and family history. I
Mhm.
mean, I've been really open. I got into genealogy after my mother died, and a lot of people do that. A lot of people have no interest in family history. That's why they're all our age, right? Until somebody significant dies. And then I remember, my dad had died, my grandparents had all died, and my mom died, and I didn't know. I was lost. I was untethered. And I dug hard into genealogy to figure out where I was. And I was talking to my husband about it this morning. And that first year of genealogy, I went back 7 generations, and it was a miserable. I did a poor job at it, but I needed to know that there were 100,000 people underneath me, um, because
Mm.
I need it. And I think everybody gets into genealogy and stays in genealogy because it tells us things we need to know about ourselves.
That is very wise and very perceptive. For me, speaking of, like, I always felt sort of like someone without a country because I grew up with two countries. So I always,
Right?
in
And
German,
countries that had been at war. I mean,
right,
how much worse can you get?
right. So, so I sort of grew up like sitting between the chairs, as it's a German expression.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, so for me now to find out that my family line goes back that far,
And
and
to
on
both
top of that,
places.
yeah, but on top of that, the irony is, so my husband and I, we live in Chicago, have lived here for more than 30 years. And about 20 years ago, we bought property in Northwest Indiana because it's close. It's like a 2-hour drive. And we built a country home there, and we spent more and more time there. Turns out, which I kind of knew because my dad went to Purdue. That's how he met my mom. So we always had sort of this affinity for Northwest Indiana anyway. But my
Didn't know
entire
why.
family side from my mom were basically pioneers who built Indiana. Like they came to the United States in, I don't even know when, before the Revolutionary War, were on the East Coast.
Yep.
Some of them Massachusetts, others North Carolina. Then they moved to Ohio. And then in the 1840s, roundabout, they moved to,
Indiana.
the prairie of Northwest Indiana and built those towns. They owned like banks and hotels and stuff like that, right? So here I am, unknowingly moved out to Northwest
Drawn to
Indiana,
it. Yeah,
and
right?
that's where my roots are.
Eh,
Isn't
I
that wild?
mean, it gives you chills and a little bit of the willies. But I bet if we got a group of 100 family historians, 100, maybe 98 people, if they thought about it, would say the same thing. That something that they're doing in their work is because they need to have that in. That there's a physical pull or an emotional pull to what they're looking at.
Mm.
I I mean, maybe that's just me, but I think if you got a room together, most people, if they thought about it, they'd come up with that. But I love the idea that your people were there, right?
Right.
And I mean, right? How do you beat that? That's awesome. I did
Yeah.
want I wanted to share a picture before I forget. This is my favorite ancestor right here. Um, this is
Wow.
my second time great grandmother, and also if anyone knows how to make these old fashioned postcards that are like this, I want to do that. I think that would be so much fun to bring back old postcards like this that are just like family pictures. So hit me up if you're doing that stuff.
Yeah, so I'd like to know that too. I have postcards that my dad's dad served in World War One, and I have his correspondence, a bunch of postcards, and he did the same thing. Like he clearly he took a picture of like the Cossack barracks in what is now Ukraine. Yeah, that'll
Yeah,
blow your mind.
right.
And he sent that to his brother in Vienna. And then
But
I look at the back, and there used to be a service in the
yeah,
1914, 15, whatever,
yeah,
where you could do this. But I'd love to
right.
know.
Because they didn't have camera, they didn't have, most people didn't have a private camera, so they took their pictures, and then thank you, Robin. And then they put them, they like, I developed the picture. Would you like that in a couple hundred postcards? In my head, that's how that story went, right? And you're like, yeah, for another 8 cents, I absolutely want 100 postcards about that. Gonna send it to everybody I know. I want to do that. Annette, I want to do that.
Yes, that'd be fun. I mean, my brother once in a while does that. He will
Really?
take a picture and print a postcard. Yeah. So it can be done. Can be done.
I think that's very cool. We kind of got off track there since we're talking about bias. Anything else on the topic that I mean, obviously we haven't explored all of it, but I know, I'd kind of done a little, did a little talking before we started. Did we cover everything we wanted to? I think
Um,
probably, I think, the end note to all of it is, except, if you have a bias, I have a bias. I think almost everybody has a bias towards something.
mm,
That's okay. It doesn't say that we're bad at our job or that we do anything. Oh, thank you, Kathy. We'll be talking about that. Thank you. Um,
yeah.
it doesn't mean that we're not doing a great job. It just means we have to be aware of the bias and be curious about the rest of it, the stuff that's not our favorite. It's like having to eat broccoli. Um, just just do it, right? I know I don't like broccoli, but once a week, by golly, I'm gonna have some. I'm gonna
Oh my
have
God,
some
yeah.
broccoli.
I think another thing also is just personalities. I just look back on my note at my notes.
Mhm.
So my German grandmother just liked to tell stories about her, how
Right?
about her childhood. She was someone who remembered stuff.
Yeah.
Versus, for instance, I still have a living uncle, and he's always been the world's most taciturn person. I mean, it takes him like 3 days of hanging out with you to finally open up a little bit.
Like,
I got no time for that. Like it just doesn't happen that you spend that much time together. So I think that's also part of what goes on, right? In
yeah.
terms of who's more gregarious and who tells you stories.
Right. And I mean, like, in my family and ancestry, telling family stories. I mean, it was hard. It was because we just are not crazy. We don't talk about ourselves. But it's just like those kinds of stories. Just you know, either you know them or you don't, and then that's just how that is. Um, but yeah, and that, oh gosh, that reminded me of something, and I may have lost it. Um, yeah, I lost it. Go ahead. It'll come back.
Yeah. Do you have, 'cause I think you can see the chat better than me.
Yep.
Do we have any questions or
Yeah.
comments coming in?
No questions yet. Kathy Stone is saying that she has some resources about making those postcards on Kathy's
Okay.
Corner. Robin said we need to talk more. Uh,
Thank
Deborah
you.
said, I totally agree with what you're talking about. Mama Carol said, I love letters from World War II. I think everybody loves those old family letters, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's about it. Does anybody have any comments or questions, or like, is there a bias that you see, or
I'd like
th-
I'd like to know if people favor the paternal or maternal side.
yeah.
If that's just
Oh,
happenstance.
that's what it was. Oh,
Okay.
thank you. That's what it was. I was wondering about that because, like, traditionally, women are the story keepers, right? We're the ones that document stuff. We're the ones that keep the pictures. We're the ones that do all that.
Mm.
And so my idea was that maybe we follow the maternal line more because they document themselves better, right? They have more documentation. But I don't know. I was looking through my own stuff, and I don't know that that holds up. That was just like a going into it theory when we first started talking about it, was like
Right.
maybe we're biased because it's not so hard to find them because they were better keepers of stuff. I mean, like when I die, 100 years from now, I've got so much stuff around that they're gonna love me or they're gonna hate me. And one or the other, I'm not sure. Tamara said, I have a bias to my paternal side, but the more I research my maternal side, the more I was biased towards that side. Absolutely. And you know what, Tamara? I have an idea that that might have something to do with, again, why we do the research we do. Kathy says, my bias right now is whether I research my stepfather's family, right? Donna, about 10 years ago, I was deep diving into research about my paternal Lithuanian family. Right now, I'm doing a deep dive into my maternal Jewish side from Ukraine and Belarus. Linda, I'm more interested in my paternal because no one did any research on them. Good point. And
Mhm.
lots of documentation on my mother's side. Yeah, right. So maybe there's almost a anti-bias about a group that maybe had too much, it's too easy to find. Um, but then
Yeah,
sometimes I like to go after hard research. Sometimes if it's like, I want a challenge. I don't know, maybe
of
a
course
word.
you do. Otherwise it'd be boring.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
if it's right there, if it's shooting ducks in a pond, that's not as fun. Uh,
Right. Like I think, one of the things that depressed me a little bit putting the family tree together was that, when you sort of put in other information, there's, at least in my case, very little information on the women because most
yeah,
of them were, my German grandmother was unusual in the sense that she had an education. She was a teacher. But there's less documentation. And on my American grandfather's, the Keller side, like one of the guys, was an instructor at Purdue, and he was really an extraordinary person. So
mhm,
there's he wrote
right.
papers. There's an
Lots of
obituary
documentation.
in the newspaper. There's a lot, and the family's very proud of him. And he was also a looker. He was a very handsome
Yeah,
man. So there's
yeah.
all everybody has a picture of
Right,
him.
just the star. Yeah, the golden boy.
Right,
Yeah,
he's
right.
the
Yeah,
star, exactly, and so I found it a bit depressing putting it together, because the men often have, uh, on the face of it, the more interesting stories because there's,
right.
more document
There's
like,
there's
the
there's more
family
to
moved
work
because
with,
my
right?
grandfather worked here and worked there. They didn't work because of my grandmother did this or that, right?
Right, right, yeah, yeah, they were the yeah, and I think that's it's a challenge. It's a no-brainer, right? I mean, nobody's denying that there's more information on most men there is on most women, but it's also like this wonderful challenge that we can find those stories and tell those stories in a way that kind of raises the whole boat on the family, right? Because the women
Mhm.
were carrying half of it at least. I mean, come on now.
Right.
Um, you know,
Yeah, I
yeah,
also find that when
yes,
you talk
David.
when,
David says
when it
risk
comes to
takers.
the more,
Oh,
like, the stuff that
go ahead.
sorry, the stuff that sort of makes family relationships, that the warm stuff, right?
The soft, squishy stuff. Yeah.
The soft, pushy stuff, like, that's where the women's legacy comes in, right? And I often feel that, so men have the careers, had the careers, but then so what?
Yeah.
Like, but I'm
Yeah.
still making my grandmother's recipe, right? And my kids
Yeah.
know what it is, and like, everybody
Right.
relates to it, and everybody talks about her
Yeah.
because she left
A,
stuff that we
a
still use,
trail.
right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. David Shaw says risk takers and rule breakers in the family tree make for better stories. They do. But then, I mean, we say that, but then think of like, I've got a sometime like a third grade aunt or something like that, who came to America by herself at 17 years old. I mean, that's a hell of a risk.
Mm,
Right? And I don't know anything about that journey other than that she was on this boat, and I can't find anybody else on that boat that was from the same town or ended up in the same place. I mean, that's a hell of a risk. How do I tell that story? It's a great story, but I don't know what it is. Um,
mm,
and like you said, she wasn't being written up in the paper, and if she was under her husband's name, which isn't a problem. I mean, you know what? I don't have any problem because somebody referring to me as Mrs. White. I don't care. Um, uh, but you can find you just can't find all the details, right? That's the challenge,
Right.
is how do you go deeper when the historical record is so thin?
Do you know why she left? Do you know sort of what the
Don't
pre-story
know.
is?
Her family didn't leave. Her family left 9 months later. Uh, and it's just like yeah, I don't know why she
Mm.
left. She left 9 months before all of her family did. She went and stayed. She went from Germany to Detroit, and ended up never leaving Detroit and lived with an aunt that had already gotten there. And the rest of the family came 9 months over and went to Wisconsin. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, so the family was, like, divided between Wisconsin, and it stayed like that until 1920s or something like that.
Maybe
But
she
I've got family pictures of all of them together in both places, so it wasn't like there was a estrangement, and I've got family stories of them, traveling together, and I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be material for historical fiction, but if you can't find anything, it's
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Robin says the moments let you know more about who they were. It doesn't need to be a risk. It can be something so small but revealing about who the ancestor was as a person. The kitchen table moment. Yeah. Right. It's not always I mean, I think a lot of us have. I mean, it's fun to find the big stories. It's rewarding. It's fun to tell them. They're easier to tell because in a historical record, you don't know. The small stories never move forward, right? Which
yeah.
is, of course, the reason that we all need to write down our own damn stories.
Hmm. Yeah. But
Right?
I often like one good entry point I find are well, you and I talked about that are family
Mhm.
objects. If,
Yeah.
if you have something from one person, maybe that's all you know about them, but there's
Yeah.
always a little bit of
There's
story
something there,
attached, or a little bit
right?
of a characteristic, right? So you get a feel for who they were or what they
Yeah.
did. Like my grandfather bought from this submarine trip he took to Brazil. He brought back a chest, and that chest was in the family. One of my cousins now has it, right? That's all we know, but
Yeah.
there's this chest, so it's this
Think of the
artifact,
stories
that
that are in
proves
that chest you can't see, though, right? I
right,
mean, those are the things that make me just like get so excited about potentially finding one of those, right? How do you know you're not going to find it?
right,
Because I mean, he carried that chest, and then it was important enough that it stayed in the family. And it wasn't because they just needed something to put because they needed to put something their blankets in. Right?
yeah. David's asking about the submarine trip to Brazil, so
Right.
David, look in your chat. I sent you an earlier message about that actually. So he did a maiden voyage, basically testing out whether the submarine worked. Apparently,
Mhm.
that's what they did.
Yeah. That story that David that you just put out, stunning. That was a stunning story. Go David. That was awesome. That was that's one of those that you're like, you see it on a movie and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you hear about a family member doing that and you're like, holy crap. Right? Um, good job. Good job, David. We're probably getting long. I don't know. This is the first time I've ever done one of these on my own, which is probably why it's going so long. We should
No,
probably
no.
hang up. What do we do? Do we want to keep
Half
going?
an hour, half an hour is good, I
Okay.
think.
Is it
Unless
that long?
anybody has
Okay.
something
All
else
right.
to chime in on.
Yeah. Anybody else? We kind of went far ranging, but I think we did I mean, I actually had a sheet of paper. So, I
Me
mean,
too. Me too.
right? See,
We,
that's why we were so yes.
we did our homework.
We did, and we kept mostly on track, so that was super good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I think maybe it's a good day for maybe this week, maybe, or sometime to sit a minute and think about um where our biases might be, right? And just say,
Right.
if I look at my tree or the stories I'm telling, whose stories aren't I telling? and then maybe go find them, right?
And, you can also operate within your own bias. So,
Oh, of
since you're
course, yeah.
interested in the Gilded Age, you can look at the Gilded Age, what each side of the family was doing. Or in my case, I'm sort of a World War II person.
Yeah.
Turns out, there's also plenty of stories on my mom's side from World War II.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And I don't think there's anything wrong with skipping around. This is not a linear family history is not a linear pursuit. You don't start with
right.
Adam and move your way forward, and you don't start with yourself and just move yourself backwards. It would be boring, and no one in the entire world would ever do it, right? We learned this, and then we're like, oh, that's cool. Let's keep chasing that. Or we say, I'm done with this. I'm more interested in this today because I saw it on the news, or because Annette and I were
Mm.
talking about it, and you're like, oh, maybe somebody in my family was on a submarine on the way to Brazil. I should check that out. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure some people are very, very disciplined in their research, and I love them for that. Um, I am not that person.
I think most people are not because it's the rabbit hole syndrome, right?
It
Like you
is.
sort of follow the crumbs and then
Yeah,
you find
or what
yourself.
gets you excited that morning, that's good. All right, uh,
Okay.
this has been so much fun, and, we should do
Same
this, like,
here.
every Thursday or something. Is it it's
Well,
Thursday,
thanks,
right?
thanks, thanks for putting your thoughts out there. Because
Yeah,
otherwise we would have not come up with this. So
yeah, right, yeah, yeah,
there we
I
go.
mean, I think it's a valid conversation. It's always good to look at what you're doing and why you're doing it, and make better decisions or keep making the same one. Barbara says, I think that's the secret of rabbit holes, teacups and marmalade jars, right? Just like
Mhm.
go do what you want, right? Unless you're on the time clock, do what you want. that's,
Follow your
that's what I'm
passion.
saying. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for your
Thank
comments. And
you.
and I don't know that we had any questions, but if you have any questions, send them over. Annette and I are happy to answer them, or together, separately, however. But let's keep the conversation at least in our head about who we research, what attracts our attention, and maybe think a little bit harder about why we're telling the stories we're telling. My
True.
2 cents at the end.
You might discover, like I did, amazing things about the side you've been neglecting. Who knows?
Right? Or like you said, that connection, right? To Indiana, to wanting,
Right.
that colonial, that feeling of I belong here too. I mean, we all need that, whether it's in a family dynamic or a cultural thing or a national thing or a career. I mean, finding out that somebody else in your family did the same thing that you're pursuing, that's validating. That's a connection that matters. So,
Right.
all right. And
That's what
also,
gives meaning to the whole thing. So
it is. And also sit down and write your own damn stories. Just saying. All
yes.
right. Thanks, Annette. That was so
Thank you,
much
Lori.
fun.
Thanks for hosting.
We'll see you
Bye.
later. Bye bye.
Bye.